To begin making our little bird weaving here, we're going to start with the tabby weave. So we're going to get our loom that we created. We have a length of yarn. This is about 2 times the length of my arm here. And we need a weaving needle. Now in order to thread this needle here, I'm going to take the very end of my yarn and I'm going to make a small loop. So I'm just bending it in half. And the little loop up here has to be kind of small. Then I'm going to stick it through the eye of the needle here. Once it's through, I don't pull it through all the way. I sort of keep this loop here and take this small little tail and put it right through that loop. Then I'm going to grab it and pull it tight. This will keep the thread from falling off, and it's also pretty great because it's easy to pull off. If you just take this little piece here, you can pull it right back off. Now, to start weaving, I'm actually not going to put a knot on this end of my yarn here. This is going to stay open. And I'm going to start by going over and under my warp threads here. So I'm going to use my needle to go over and under. And I have another tool. I have this really large popsicle stick. And what I like to do is I like to stick it under all of the strings and then turn it sideways. That sort of lifts it up a little bit to make it easier to weave up and down. So I'm going to start by going under the first one and then over, and I'm just going to keep going over and under all the way across to the other side. Once I get to the other side and I'm sure that I've gone over and under every single one, I'm going to pull the needle through and keep pulling the string until I have just a small tail left. Right here. And then I want to be careful not to pull it all the way through because then I have to start over. And then I'm just going to pull this all the way down to the bottom. And then what's really important is on the way back, I have to do the opposite of what I did on the way here. So if my string is on this side, then my needle is going to come back from this side here. And I'm going to do the opposite of what I did last time. So if you look at this last warp thread here, you can see that my yarn went under it. It went under. So what I'm going to do this time when I come back with my needle is I'm going to go over that one so that every single one going backwards is going to be opposite. I'm going to continue with over and under all the way across like this. And then I'm going to pull it all the way to the end. And then when I'm just about here, I have to be careful to leave something called a weaver's bubble. A weaver's bubble is this little loop that's on the end here. If I pull it too tight, then it starts to pull this warp string in, and we don't want that. So I'm going to pull it back, leave this little bubble here on the end, and then press it down all the way. And when I come back to do the next row, then I have to make sure I do the opposite of what I just did. So again, looking at this warp thread, I see that I went over it this time. So since I went over it this time, I'm going to go under on the way back. So I'm going to go over and under all the way across. And I'm going to pull it all the way. And once I get close to that end there, I'm going to go slowly so that I can leave a little weaver's bubble. So I want there to be that little loop, and then I press it down. Again, that's going to stop the warp strings from coming in as I go above. So I'm going to continue with that for a little bit. Now you can see that I'm getting to the end of my string here. And you can also see that you can sort of see some of these warp threads through my weaving. We don't want to see those warp threads. So if you can see some of those warp threads peeking through, then what we're going to do is we're really going to make sure that we press down. It's really important that for this project and any weaving project, we keep our weavings tight. So you always want to push it so far down that you don't see any of the warp threads through it. Now that I've gotten to the end of this, I can go ahead and pull this off, and I can thread another needle with different thread. Now again, I'm going to be taking the end of my yarn, making a small loop, and sticking that loop through the eye of the needle. Once I have my loop, I take that little tail and it goes through the loop and I pull it tight. Now when I go to start weaving again, what I like to do is I leave this tail here. I don't have to tie it at all. At the end I can cut it, or I can just cut it a little bit shorter to make it a little bit more manageable. That's okay. And then I'm going to look at where this last thread ended right here, and it looks like it went under. So I'm going to start this next one by going over. And I'm just going to continue weaving just like I was before. Again, when I pull this one, I have to be very careful that once I get to the end of my string, I don't pull it too tight, because if it goes through, I've got to start that one over. So I've got to stop about here and then press it down really tight. And then again, keep weaving like I was before. So I see that this went over my last warp thread. This time I'm going to go under it. Now I made a mistake here on purpose just so that you can see it and you can recognize it if it happens to you. If you can see every other warp thread here, and then I've closed that off on top. If you notice something like this, and no matter how much you press it down, you can't get rid of it, it means that somewhere along the line, we've skipped over 2 instead of 1. So if this happens to you, we actually have to go ahead and undo the rows until we see where the problem is. So I'm going back across here to pull it off. It might be easier for you actually just to take this off of the thread and pull it backwards. And oh, if I pull this back, I can see where my problem was. I jumped over 2 pieces of string here instead of just 1, and that resulted in being able to see my warp threads. So if you notice that, then stop right away so that you can pull it back and fix your problem before you get too far along.